The eternal train. In the dead of night, Caleb stumbled onto the platform of an old railway station he didn't recognize. The air was thick with mist, muffling the sound of his hurried breaths. His heart pounded in his chest, though he couldn't remember why. Behind him, the woods were silent, the kind of silence that screams. He stared at the rusted tracks ahead. There was no timetable, no passengers, just the faint hum of something approaching. Caleb wanted to turn back, but something, curiosity or maybe desperation, rooted him to the spot. The train arrived. It wasn't like any train he'd ever seen. The locomotive was massive, black as the void, with streaks of green light spilling out of its windows. Its smokestack bellowed a sickly, iridescent vapor that curled unnaturally in the air, forming shapes Caleb couldn't quite focus on. The brakes screeched like the cries of tortured souls as the train came to a stop. A door slid open, revealing nothing but darkness inside. There was no conductor, no announcement, just an unspoken command that he should board. Against all logic, his feet obeyed. The interior of the train was worse than the exterior. The hall was narrow and dimly lit, the flickering lights casting jagged shadows that seemed to move on their own. The air smelled of damp wood and something faintly metallic, blood maybe. Each compartment door he passed bore a brass plate etched with a name. When he looked closer, he saw his name on one. The door creaked open on its own, revealing a room that shouldn't exist. Inside was a perfect replica of his childhood bedroom. The bunk bed with the dinosaur sheets, the crooked posters on the walls, even the faint scorch mark on the carpet from the time he'd dropped a candle trying to summon spirits with his friends. He stepped in, trembling. It was then that he noticed the photo on the bedside table. It hadn't been there when he was a kid. The image was blurry, showing a group of people sitting at a long dinner table. He leaned closer, his stomach turning as he recognized himself among them. His face was hollowed out, his eyes sunken, his smile stretched too wide. A whisper brushed against his ear. "You were always meant to be here." He spun around, but the room was empty. The door slammed shut behind him. Panic set in. He tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. His fists pounded against the wood, but the sound barely registered. The walls began to warp, twisting as though they were alive. The air grew heavier, suffocating him. Suddenly, the window shattered outward and he was pulled through. Caleb landed hard on the floor of another train car, this one far different. It was cavernous, filled with rows of pews like an abandoned church. Figures sat in them, their faces obscured by hoods or masks. Their bodies didn't move, but their heads turned in unison to stare at him. Their eyes, those who had them, glowed faintly like embers. "You shouldn't have boarded," one of them rasped, their voice a chorus of overlapping tones. "But now that you're here, you belong to the train." "What is this place?" Caleb demanded, his voice breaking. "Where is it taking me?" Another figure turned to him, its face a void. "This is the between, a place for those who slip through the cracks. The train moves forever, taking us nowhere until we find someone to take our place." Caleb backed away, his heart hammering. "Number, this isn't real. I'll get off. There is no off," the first figure whispered. "But you can still run." The pews rattled as the figures began to rise. Caleb didn't wait to see what they'd do next. He bolted down the aisle, his shoes echoing against the cold metal floor. Behind him, the passengers gave chase, their movements unnaturally fast, limbs bending in ways that defied anatomy. The train cars blurred together as he ran, one filled with crimson fog, another where gravity seemed reversed, and one that was completely silent except for the echo of his own screams. Finally, he reached the engine room. The controls were incomprehensible, a mess of dials and levers labeled in languages he didn't recognize. The glass ahead revealed the impossible landscape outside. Jagged mountains floated in the sky, rivers of molten light flowed upward, and stars spun too close, as if they'd fallen from the heavens. The train jolted violently, throwing Caleb against the console. The passengers were at the door now, their hands pounding against it. Their faces, those hollow, empty faces, peered through the small window, grinning as the door began to bend inward. With no other options, Caleb gripped the largest lever and yanked it down. The train screamed. Reality itself seemed to tear as the train lurched forward, faster than any machine should move. The world outside became a blur of color and darkness. Caleb clung to the console, his body barely holding together as the vibrations threatened to tear him apart. And then, silence. The door behind him was gone. The pounding was gone. Even the hum of the engine had disappeared. Caleb turned to find himself alone, standing in the middle of an endless plain. The train was gone, as though it had never existed. But he wasn't free. The plain stretched on forever, empty except for a single pair of train tracks running into the horizon. Caleb knew with bone-deep certainty that if he started walking, the train would come back for him. It always came back. And this time, there would be no escape. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed the video. Please take a second to hit that subscribe button. We upload daily. Bye for now.